Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the creative world. My name is Ryan, and in today's video, I'm going to be giving you guys a quick and dirty lighting and editing breakdown of the following image. To do this, I used a Sony Alpha 6500, a Sony 16 to 50mm kit lens, and 3 Yongnuo YN560 Mark IV Speedlites. My camera settings were ISO 160, f3.5, and 1/160 shutter speed. The first light was at 1/128th power, 24mm with a cyan gel shooting through a beauty dish directly above my subject. The second light was at 1/16th power, 24mm with a blue gel shooting through a medium-sized softbox from the ground up at my seamless backdrop. The third light was at 1/128th power, 24mm with a red gel shooting through a medium-sized softbox on the ground shooting up towards my subject to fill in the shadows. Here's what each light looks like individually. Here are all the lights together, and this is the final image. I started off my edit by changing my aspect ratio from 2:3 to 16:9. Next, I used the patch tool, content aware tool, and clone stamp tool to remove various objects from the background, such as the light stands and the hands holding up my subject's clothing. Since I extended the canvas sideways by converting the aspect ratio to 16:9, with the rectangular marquee selection, I used the content aware scale tool to extend my background image. I used the liquify tool on my subject to correct any kind of posing errors and even out my subject's overall silhouette, as well as corrections to the subject's wig and clothing. For skin retouching, I used frequency separation. On the high pass layer, I used the spot healing brush to remove any kind of blemishes. On the low pass layer, with the lasso tool and a feathered radius, I made large, broad selections of the skin areas and used the Gaussian blur tool to even out the skin tones. I repeated the same process for the seamless backdrop. I realized that my subject's eyes were a little too dim, so I duplicated my subject's layer, opened it in Camera Raw, and adjusted the exposure, clarity, and contrast on the subject's eyes. After pressing OK, I added an inverted layer mask to that layer and painted white over the eyes. For dodge and burn, I used curve adjustment layers with inverted layer masks, one layer that brightens and one layer that darkens. I then painted white on each layer respectively to dodge and burn my subject. To enhance the light, I brought in some stock images of flares, one red and one blue. I set each layer to the blending mode of screen and adjusted the opacity to fit the image. To enhance the effect of the blue light wrapping around my subject, I created a new layer, set the blending mode to screen, and with a large soft round brush, I lightly painted in blue around my subject's silhouette. To make the subject's eyes a little bit more magical, I created a 1 pixel wide circle of the same color as my subject's contact lenses. I then added a slight blur to that circle. I then double-clicked that layer to open up the layer blending options and added an outer glow of a slightly darker color and hit OK. Then I added a layer mask to that layer and painted away parts of that circle where it shouldn't be seen. I repeated this process for the other eye. To add a bit of visual interest, I decided to make copies of parts of my subject's clothing and enlarge it into the foreground. I used a combination of the Puppet Warp tool and Free Transform Warp tool to shape those layers in a creative fashion. I then added a bit of blur to those layers to make it seem like they're closer to the camera. The final visual element that I added was some particles from my Fire and Embers asset pack. I brought in the image and set the blending mode to screen, and on a layer mask I painted away areas that I didn't want. The finishing touches to my image was a 3-part process: sharpening, chromatic aberration, and color grading. For sharpening, I created a clone stamp visible layer by pressing Ctrl, Alt, Shift, and E, merging all visible layers into a new layer on top. I set that blending mode to overlay, went up to filter, other, high pass filter, and selected a radius that yielded the sharpening that I wanted. I again merged all visible layers to a new layer, double-clicked that layer to open up the blending mode options, and unchecked one of the color channels, and hit OK. I then offset this image by a few pixels to add some chromatic aberration. Finally again, I merged all visible layers into a new layer and opened that layer up into Camera Raw. Here in Camera Raw, I made various adjustments to my curves, values, and added some film grain. To finalize the color grading, I created a color lookup adjustment layer, set the blending mode of that layer to color, and then cycled through various different LUTs until I had some colors that I was pleased with. Guys, thanks for watching. If you like this video, maybe give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions at all, let me know in the comments below. And if you want to see more content like this in the future, consider subscribing. And until next time, stay creative.